All right, and thanks for tuning in to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio AM 1220. Also, you can find us at hometownstation.com. Also, wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, you can reach out to us on social media. You can get all of our shows, and that's at The Speed Traveler on both Instagram and also on YouTube. And my name's Charlie Frank. I'm joined here by my co-host Chris Evertsen. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Charlie. It's great to be on the show again and be doing this live once more. And, honestly, I didn't come to the studio today. If I really wanted to say I didn't show up because of weather, that would be a bit of a lie. But I'm down here in San Diego. The surf is looking pretty good, and it's a beautiful sunny day.
Right.
So I figured, after the show, I'm going to go have some fun.
Yeah, it's a good day to not be on the 5 freeway going between San Diego and Los Angeles.
It really is.
Well, we've got some interesting things to talk about today. We are going to talk about the Bentley marque. That's our featured marque of the day. And Chris and I just got back from an amazing road trip that we took with Bentley last week. And coming up in our next segment, or actually in segment 3, we're going to talk a little bit about that trip. We're also going to talk about the Formula One race. There was a great Formula One race down at the Australian Grand Prix a week ago, and coming up is the Japanese GP, so that'll be in our final segment today. Also, Chris, in segment B, we're going to talk about EV. I mean, we're on a radio station that has political radio all day long, so we might as well get political, right?
Well, I don't even know if it's political, but the EV, what we'll call controversy here in the U.S. is kind of exploding. I mean, there's a lot to be said on both sides of that coin. So I'm looking, to go electric or to not go electric. So I'm looking forward to having that heated discussion, if you will, with you and perhaps some listeners.
Yeah. By the way, if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us on the aforementioned YouTube channel, which is The Speed Traveler. Also on Instagram at The Speed Traveler. And Chris, it's springtime, and one of our favorite times of the year. We have some great stuff coming up. We are going to be doing the show live from Le Opera Restaurant on the corner of First and Pine on Long Beach Grand Prix weekend on both April 19 and April 20. So if you're out there and you're looking for something fun to do on those nights, come on by Le Opera and say hi to us. So I'm sure if you've got some questions, we can answer questions there, but we always have a lot of fun.
Yeah, the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach is always on the top of my calendar. It's one of my favorite times of year. It's probably one of the best street courses in the world, if not, the best street course. I mean, it's hard to compete with Monaco, but this is certainly the Monaco of the West. Now Formula One is in Miami, which is another very interesting street course. But really, the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach, with its storied history, is, in my opinion, one of the greatest motorsports events in the world.
Yeah, it started in 1975, so they're coming up on their 50th annual event. I mean, really pretty incredible to think about that. And you're right, it is like the Monaco of the United States. The only difference is you can actually pass at the Long Beach Grand Prix. You can't pass anywhere at Monaco.
Yeah, and as Jim McKellian, who was our guest a couple of weeks ago on the show, and the Long Beach Grand Prix, the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach, has a ton of spectator accessibility. So it's not like you're closed off or cordoned off like some of the things we found, like at the Las Vegas Formula One race last year and some other events we've been at. The Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach is really spectator friendly. So whether you're really into the auto racing or some of the other events that are going on, or the lifestyle, the fun stuff, all the fun stuff and shows that are going on, rock concerts and what have you, it's just a great time for the entire family.
Yeah, that's a great point. The Stadium Super Trucks will be back again this year, and that's Robbie Gordon's series where he builds 15 identically prepared trucks. And it's really pretty funny. I mean, the trucks, they set up these steel ramps on the front straightaway. And if you haven't seen it, Google it or go to YouTube and pull it up. I mean, it's incredible. The trucks jump about 150 feet and about 30 feet high.
Yeah, we even have some great stadium super truck footage on our YouTube page at the Speed Traveler as well.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. But if you haven't seen it, and a lot of people might be listening for the first time and don't really know what the Speed Traveler is or does. But Chris and I are professional race car drivers, professional race car driving instructors. We're stunt drivers for the movie industry, and we've bought and sold, I don't know, probably 200 cars, and we like to share our knowledge. We've done really well on some of the cars, and we're definitely getting better, but we've lost our tails on some too. So by sharing
Yeah.
those mistakes, it gives people an idea how to get into the classic car, exotic car market.
Yeah, you don't need to be a race car driver to be a car enthusiast. There's just people that like to cruise and have a good time. I mean, look at the lowrider community. You look at the drifting community, which is competition, but it's not necessarily racing. And you know what? Like you mentioned in the earlier in the show, we're going to be talking about that great Bentley rally we took from Newport to Palm Desert and back. So you don't have to be a race car enthusiast to be a car enthusiast.
No, I agree. That's a good point. If you go to our page on YouTube, our channel, we've got dozens and dozens of videos about particular cars that we love and that we've test driven. Not just new cars, but classic cars, mostly classic cars. And we've also highlighted some of our adventures going from Universal Studios to Malibu via Mulholland Highway. It's one of my favorite. And then we've, done we did another trip from Malibu to San Francisco, and that was really fun along Highway 1.
Yeah, and these are only the videos that we've actually shot. I mean, we've taken so many car rides around the country that if you ever have a question as to some fun routes anywhere in this beautiful country of ours, a driving-centric country, ask us about it, because I mean, we've been all over the place from California to Florida. There are some great roads to drive.
Yeah.
And great cars to drive on them.
Yeah. No, there really are. So I think, you know what, Chris, why don't we take a quick break and then we'll come back and we're going to talk a little bit about the electronic vehicle market, including our buddies over at the Fisker Manufacturing Company. And we'll take it from there. Once again, this is the Speed Traveler Roadshow, and you're listening to KHTS Radio AM 1220. All right, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio AM 1220, also available at hometownstation.com and on our YouTube page, which is the Speed Traveler. Also at Instagram, you can find us, and anywhere, Chris, you get your podcast downloaded.
Yeah, I mean, find us, just Google the Speed Traveler. You'll find us someplace. And, always remember to hit that like button, the follow button, and share us with your friends. And ask us your questions. If we say something smart and you think that's poignant and you agree, give us a thumbs up. If you think we're knuckleheads, give us a thumbs down. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. I think we certainly got a lot of thumbs up and thumbs down when we were talking about our Prince Valiant haircuts. So one of my favorite episodes from back in November of last year. But you know what?
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it was a period of time when we both desperately needed not only a haircut but a hairstyle.
Yeah, and it's so funny how people are always harassing, and they're like, "Dude, wear a hat. Just wear a hat and be done with it." I'm like, "All right, so I'm wearing my hat today. I don't know about you."
Well, since I'm not on video today, I don't need to have my Sparco safety hat on.
I love that.
One bad haircut at a time.
Nice plug for Sparco. That was good. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about EVs and government Yeah, right. And government mandates of EVs. So we've brought this subject up before. And Chris and I are not anti-EVs. I think there's a place and time for them. If you live in Santa Monica, California, for instance, and you want to be really clean, at least, in driving around, maybe not how the car is manufactured, but in your driving and it makes you feel good, then I think there's a great place for it. Now, if you live in upstate New York, you're not going to get much life or you're not going to get much charge out of your battery. So it doesn't really work. There are also places in Texas, places outside Los Angeles where you have to drive a lot. It just isn't quite perfected yet. And I don't know. I don't ever seeing it. I don't ever see it working, Chris, unless they could figure out a way that you pull in a service station and there's like some, you know, 1.3 million gigawatt thing that just zaps the car and gives it an instant it gives it an instantaneous charge, right? I mean, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. You brought up a whole lot of aspects to discuss in that, and one of those is, it works in the span of usage of an electric car.
Yep.
Sure, it is absolutely going to have a perhaps lighter impact on air quality with exhaust.
Right.
So that one-to-one aspect there kind of works, but it does. You mentioned it. It does not account for the mining and construction and shipping and distribution of these vehicles, let alone the infrastructure to support that.
Right.
And I think, to take one topic at a time, I think one of the biggest issues we have here in America, and this is not necessarily a global issue yet, or maybe it is, and we just haven't heard the same stories out of Europe and other places. But here in America, it's the mandates are suggesting a one-to-one replacement for gas vehicles with the electric vehicle, and that solution just fails to address some huge issues across the board. You mentioned it, the ability to charge a car more easily in bigger cities like Santa Monica, Los Angeles, or on the East Coast of New York. But what do you do in between all of that? It doesn't, EV cars, if you're trying to be efficient, generally speaking, don't have the most efficient electric vehicles that have the least amount of impact, don't have the greatest range in the world either. So getting from town to town doesn't really work in this one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And also on the pollution aspect, they don't, if you're talking about CO2 emissions while you're actually driving, forgetting the manufacturing process, but just the driving part. I read an interesting article recently that said the fact that the cars are generally 1,000 plus pounds heavier than combustion engine cars, what's happening is there's little particles that come off the tires. And these are coming off the tires and basically at a much higher rate than a combustion engine vehicle that weighs 1,000 pounds less. And this is causing its own form of pollution in the bigger areas like Los Angeles. So, yeah, I think what's weird is there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of thought process going to all EV vehicles. Like California states that every car's got to be EV by 2035. Well, that's great, and I also like to be the Queen of England, but, that's not going to happen. So that's not going to happen. So I think the problem is you have these politicians that are just throw these numbers out because it sounds cool and looks good, and that there's just no thought behind how you're actually going to get there.
Yeah, and that goes to the infrastructure aspect of it all. I mean, you mentioned that the cars are 1,000 pounds heavier, and I'm certain a lot of drivers have noticed that the lane closest, the further to the off ramps and on ramps of the road on a lot of roads are usually much thicker concrete and maybe not quite as smooth. And that's because those are generally the truck lanes,
right,
whereas the inside lanes and the HOV lanes and things like that are usually blacktop, which are a little more cost-effective to assemble,
right,
a little lighter weight, and also a lot quieter. You mentioned the tires and tire noise and,
right,
and tire pollution.
Right.
And with these cars getting heavier and heavier, that's going to have an effect on the durability of the infrastructure that it exists now, and quite frankly, really hasn't been updated in a lot of places other than a little bit of pothole repair across the country. I mean, I know a lot of, people at Sandag, and Caltrans fans and was it AZ Dot in Arizona.
Right.
I mean, they do a great job and an unheralded job of building and maintaining this freeway infrastructure. But it's going to require a change and adaptation to the electric vehicle and its weight, and a couple other issues as far as charging cars.
Yeah, and what's interesting to note is the largest vehicle manufacturer in the world right now, consumer vehicle, is Toyota. And they build over 11 million cars and sell over 11 million cars a year. So they really have their act together.
And what percentage of those 11 million cars are all electric?
Yeah, so I think that last year it was 2.3, if I remember correctly, only 2.3% of their fleet is electric, and that rate wasn't really going up at all. I mean, they only expect to sell 100,000 EVs in all of 2024. So you mentioned Toyota a few weeks ago, Chris, and I think what was it, the 1690 rule?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so basically,
And so one for every single all-electric car that they build, it takes the same amount of energy and cost to build six hybrid cars or 90 combustion engine cars. So
yeah.
think about that. One all-electric car or 90 combustion engine cars for the same cost.
Yeah, I mean, that fact is unbelievable. So one electric car, they can build one electric car, and with the same amount of energy, they can build 90 and components. They could build 90 combustion engine cars. So I
Yeah.
clearly, the government's not taking this into consideration. And the other thing is, on top of it, is on a geopolitical level, is the United States is gutting their automotive industry, and they're going to have to use batteries and lithium and battery components provided by China. And it just doesn't seem to me, I might be a regular layperson, but I'm a car enthusiast and you are too. But that just doesn't seem smart to me to hand over our automotive industry to the Chinese.
Yeah, and I'm going to take this just outside of the car industry for just a moment. If we consider this, everybody in the United States, if not, well, I would say 99.9% of everyone in the United States has a cell phone, and everyone's using these cell phone tires, and every single one of those cell phone towers comes from China. Now,
Yeah.
the one exception to that rule is military bases.
Right.
And cell phone towers on military bases, it's mandated that it specifically says cannot come from China. Components cannot come from China. They can be sourced elsewhere, hopefully mostly here in the United States. But that's something military bases just in cell phone towers is taking into consideration.
Yeah,
So,
and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, why would you hand that over to an adversary? I mean, it's not 25 years ago where China was an emerging nation. They've got a target on our back here, and it makes no sense to gut our industry. I think, and we both agree on this point, one of the things that we really should be doing is looking for alt fuels. And you had mentioned
yeah,
that
and
Toyota was looking at an ammonia-based fuel.
yeah, and it works, but it's still a little, ammonia is a little bit toxic. And we were having some headsy conversations with some really intelligent people the other week, and they brought up the question, why are we not looking more at hydrogen?
Right. Yeah. That's a good
And
point.
hydrogen fuel cells, and it's pretty much readily available and pretty easy to make.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Why aren't we looking at some form of hybrid? Ooh, there's a word. Hybrid type of technology. And look, again, Charlie, we talk about this all the time. It's not that we're anti all electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. It's that we're really questioning the path in which this is being force fed down our throats. And then I'm going to take it to the infrastructure aspect of that. Here in the U.S., there's no infrastructure for this. Absolutely zero infrastructure. Whereas, and I'm going to throw a comparison, if you will, to a country that I'm fairly familiar with, and that's Switzerland. And just let's look at the rail. Time's up, but I'm going to run long on this one because I feel it's important. Switzerland first brought their train into their country in the 1840s. And it was, a gas, diesel, steam engine. They had, a steam engine run on coal,
Right.
and then they looked at combustion engines. But they quickly realized that they need to do something that is not dependent on outside resources, and they
Right.
quickly moved to electric trains in the 1890s. In the 1890s.
Yeah.
So for that long, they've been developing an infrastructure to run an electric transportation system that is readily available, and we don't have that. We just don't have that here. As a matter of fact, some industries went out of their way to destroy that not that many decades ago. I mean, I'm going to throw a movie out there, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And if you watch that movie, you'll learn exactly what happened to the red car in Los Angeles, which was an electric rail system.
Yeah, it got shot down by the by the fuel companies.
Exactly.
The big oil companies. Yeah, I agree with you totally, and I think the problem is it's just far too easy on social media, and it's just far too easy for politicians to be like, yeah, we're going to go all green in 2035, but there's just no thought going into how in the world do you get there. So, yeah. Well.
And I have a lot more to add to that, but maybe we should take a quick break and resume this conversation on the other side of this commercial message.
That sounds good. You're listening to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, and welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio in Newhall, California. You can also find us anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can see our lovely mugs if you go on to our YouTube channel, which is The Speed Traveler. I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Evertsen, and we were just having an intense conversation about electric vehicles. And Chris, you had a few more thoughts before we move on to our amazing Bentley trip last week.
Yeah, and that Bentley trip was just so awesome. And I hate to kind of lean into that on a tirade about electric cars. But to continue the tirade, our biggest issue here in the U.S. is one of infrastructure. And I don't want to pick a fight with Elon Musk because I really appreciate what he's done in pushing our industries in a number of directions,
right.
From automotive to the space industry. I just got to watch a SpaceX launch the other night here on the West Coast. It was really cool. But, the United States is relying on Elon Musk as an individual and the brand Tesla to create the infrastructure around the country for charging centers to charge these cars that we see out on the road. And there's a big push for the trucking industry to go in that direction. And it's like, well, how the heck are you going to charge a truck?
Right.
Exactly. And how long, what size is that battery going to need to be? And how heavy is that truck going to need to be? Once again, going to the Federal Highway Administration and asking the question, how much weight can this highway take? And it's kind of crazy. And to the infrastructure thing, I did mention Switzerland and the rail system and how that's basically an electrified system. Not only are the trains that go across the country and in other countries electric, but the local trams and buses in the majority of the cities are electric or on alternative fuels. But now if we consider the trucking industry, this is something I read recently that I found really, really interesting. Similar to the railroads, what they're looking at is putting sectors of wire lines on the highways, just like a train system, where the trucks can run underneath them for about a kilometer and gain that charge.
Right.
And have a little bar that comes up like the electric trains, get that charge and charge up for about a kilometer at a high rate, and then move on to the next one, basically keeping the trucks out of gas stations and on the highways,
right.
And much more efficiently, much more quickly getting from point to point. But again, it's an infrastructure question, or let me rephrase, solution that we are not putting in place here in the United States.
Yeah, no, just having the truckers go and charge. I mean, they could have a battery that goes 800 miles. It's still not going to work well. They're going to, and anything short of hiring Doc Brown from the movie Back to the Future and building flux capacitors where they do instantaneous charges. Anything short of that is not going to work. But I hadn't heard what you're talking about. And that does make a lot of sense, but it would be a huge project.
Yeah, a huge undertaking, but they have systems in place that'll allow for that. I mean, versus like here in California, we're spending, I don't know, $100 billion on a high-speed train to go from a vacant desert to another vacant desert.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like those funds could be used in a different way. If you want to go electric, maybe we use some of that money from infrastructure to go to building an infrastructure for supporting electric or hybrid vehicles. But yeah, I a lot of good ideas surrounded by a lot of stupidity, in my opinion.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. All right, well, before we run out of time in this segment, let's talk a little bit about our featured marque today, which is Bentley. And we had a great experience last week, Chris, where we were able to drive Bentleys from Newport Beach, California, over the mountains, the Santa Rosa Mountains, and into Palm Desert. And what a great experience that was.
Oh my gosh! I mean, first of all, the Bentley vehicles are beautiful. I really love their new 12-cylinder electric engine that produces 900 foot-pounds of torque.
Well, it's W12, the W12 engine. Yes.
It's not electric.
It's not electric.
I mean, what a car. I mean, across the board, those cars are absolutely beautiful. The fit and finish is just tremendous. And you mentioned, we made it out to Palm Desert. I mean, the roads that we took, the scenery we saw was just the places we went en route were just unbelievable. I mean, we ended up at the La Quinta Resort in Palm Desert, which if you've never been to the La Quinta Resort in Palm Desert, you definitely need to make a weekend of it, or at least an overnight trip. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's not the La Quinta Motel that you see everywhere. Yeah. This is the La Quinta Resort, which was built in the 1920s. It's 100 years old. It has all this amazing Hollywood history because back in the day, the Hollywood movie stars signed a contract that said they had to stay within 2.5 hours driving distance of Los Angeles. And so they couldn't fly to Cabo or wherever. They couldn't fly to whatever it was at the time, Acapulco. They couldn't go to Hawaii. They couldn't go to Florida. They had to stay 2.5 hours driving distance away from the studio. So it became this mecca for the Hollywood rich and famous back in the 1920s and 30s. And the place is just so full of history. We're talking about the La Quinta Resort in La Quinta, California. It's a 5-star place, and what a great time we had.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the restaurants there on site are amazing. The people are incredible. Yep. Everyone that works there is super, super friendly. We got to meet some amazing characters. And speaking of amazing characters, I mean, we took this journey with about 15 people. And how many cars? We had 8 cars, 8 Bentleys on the road. And, I mean, what a great gaggle of characters that we got to take this adventure on.
Yeah, it really was. And for those of you familiar with Southern California and for those of you who aren't but want to take an incredible road trip, we started in Newport Beach, California, and we took the toll road, which is Highway 73 South, to the 5 freeway. We went about 2 miles. And we got off at Ortega Highway, Highway 74.
And that's where the fun starts.
Yeah. And
right there at the 74.
And it was a great trip. They've been working like crazy on Highway 74, Ortega Highway. And I was impressed at all the bridges that have been built over the years and how smooth the road was. But what a great trip over Highway 74.
Yeah, we'll talk about the successful infrastructure.
Yeah, and then from there we got on to the Highway 15. Ortega Highway ends up in a town called Lake Elsinore. We got on the 15 freeway. We went south to Temecula, to the wine country, to the Pont family vineyard, and had a nice lunch there.
Yeah, that was really lovely. I mean, there's a number of vineyards that are absolutely beautiful there. You mentioned the Pont Vineyard where we saw it. Callaway is absolutely beautiful. I think that's where we're going to head off to the next time we go through.
Right.
And then from there, the roads are fun and winding, and the topography just changes so rapidly.
Right. Yeah. It's called this. So we end up from there. We took Highway 79. I think we connected to 371. It ended back on the 74. But in this area, at this part of the stretch, it's called the Palms to Pines Highway. So we went through some pine trees. And then all of a sudden, you go around a corner and it's rocks and desert. And how great was the scenic outlook at the Coachella Valley outlook?
Oh, I mean, the valley was clear with all the rains and the winds we've had. The air quality and was perfect, and the visibility was 100% clear. You could see the entire valley. You could see the road as it winds down into the Palm Desert area. And you can look up at the top topography, and you can see some bighorn sheep and some mules that were running around. And I think you actually saw a Gila monster at one point.
Yeah, I did. I didn't know what was next to the car, and I took a second look, and it was a Gila monster. So, yeah, really cool stuff. And also, that part of Highway 74, if you've ever seen the old movie It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, that was the famous scene where I think it was Spencer Tracy drives off the cliff, right? And
That is
yeah, and that's where
that is correct.
yeah.
Classic movie. The Big W.
Yeah, under the big
Big
W. So from there, we drove the short distance down. It took us about, you were driving straight through, I'd say it'd take about 2.5 hours from Newport to La Quinta Resort. But when we got to La Quinta Resort, we parked the Bentleys right in front. And as you mentioned, they're not paying us to say this. They were incredible hosts. The general manager whose name escapes me at the moment, was really pretty amazing. And there was a restaurant called Morgan's. The general manager there, his name was Noe. He was fantastic. Nancy helped us a lot over at the resort, and Bridget, of course. What a great trip.
Yeah, it really was, and we kind of did. I mean, the route back was slightly varying, very slightly. But it was such a cool thing to see the transitions from driving down the road with these palm tree lined roads, getting up into the desert, and then at the higher mountain elevations, just these beautiful forests of pine trees. And it was absolutely gorgeous. But one of my favorite stops, I have to say, and we made a bunch of them. One of my favorite stops is when we all made it to the Mott's Classic Car Museum.
That was amazing.
I mean, Mr. Mott was there, and he gave us a rundown of the cars and the history of the facility. And what struck me as incredibly funny was that they said they have a lot of car clubs that come through, and all the time. But we were the youngest bunch that we've seen in a while.
Yeah, it's a long time since we've been called the youngest bunch.
It's been a while. But, I mean, the cars, what do they span from? They have cars from the 1920s
Amazing.
up until the 70s-ish?
Yeah, I think so. And as you said, Mr. Mott's about 90 years old. He was there. He was fantastic. April was there. They were just so nice, and it was just a very pleasant place. It's in Menifee, California. If you ever get a chance to go hit it up for sure.
And it's not Mott's like the applesauce. It's Mott's with an E, Motte.
Yeah, he was very, very stringent about the spelling of his name, wasn't he? He's like, there's an E on the end.
I couldn't let that slide without kind of bringing that up. But she said, and it was great. They they made fresh cupcakes for the patrons and guests that come to the facility, and it's not something you would normally see at any other museum. It's just house-made pastries, house-made cupcakes. And they were free. There was no charge. Of course, they have a snack bar and stuff, but just the hospitality. It goes to the hospitality and the genuine joy and pleasure that they get out of showcasing and opening up their doors, their barn doors, as a matter of fact, to an amazing car collection.
Yeah, and
including some really cool tractors. I actually found the tractors to be probably amongst the most interesting.
Yeah, and I want to get back real quick, just circle back to La Quinta Resort. The general manager of the resort's name is Dermot, and he was such a gracious host. He even came to our dinner table along with Noe, the GM, and the chef Renee. They actually came to our big dinner table of 16 people and checked on us and made sure we were happy. And I mean, what a class act that place is.
Oh, a total class act.
And you know what, Chris? Before we end this segment, we should talk really quickly about the cars. You had the fun
Oh
of
yeah.
you had the fun of driving the Silver Spur Speed Edition, which had the W12 engine, 650 horsepower and 900 foot-pounds of torque. Bentley also makes a two-door, which is the GT and the GTC. The GTC is convertible. And those were great handling cars. They also we didn't have any, but they make an SUV called the Bentayga. But I think you were in. Can't remember if you were in the GT or the Silver Spur.
Well, I actually had an opportunity to drive both. So it's the Spur. Had the slightly smaller engine, but way more horsepower than you ever really will need.
Right.
The luxury, again, it's about the luxury of that car. I mean, so I sat down and I was like, oh my goodness, this is probably the most comfortable chair I've ever sat in.
Yeah, it was an amazing trip, and we,
just unbelievable cars.
And we encourage you to take
We should also talk about the good folks at Newport, being Bentley of Newport Beach.
Yeah.
They really opened up their doors to this event. They were super hospitable. And, it was great because normally when we do driving events that are specifically rated or work with dealerships, usually the salesperson's like trying to jam lease or sales papers down your throat. Are you signing papers? Are you signing papers? And there was absolutely none of that. It was such a nice, professional yet laid-back environment. It was just absolutely thrilling.
No, I agree. If you're looking for a Bentley, that is definitely the place to check it out. But all right, Chris, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk Formula One news. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio. All right, well, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio, AM 1220. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Charlie Frank, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Evertsen. And Chris, we are going to talk a little F1 in our final segment here. What a fantastic race at the Australian Grand Prix a week ago.
Oh, my goodness. We finally have some exciting news about Formula One.
Yeah.
And I think everybody already knows. But what a race it was in Australia. It promised to be a great opportunity for other teams other than the Red Bull to showcase their speed and their talent and their racecraft of the drivers and then the performance of the cars. And Australia did not disappoint. I mean, Ferrari 1-2. Headline.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And for those of you who don't watch a lot of Formula One, the all-conquering Red Bull team and the all-conquering driver, Max Verstappen, who won, I think, 90+% of the races last year, he had an issue, but you felt that the Ferrari team with Carlos Sainz had him anyways, but he had an issue on the third lap.
I mean, Carlos Sainz, coming back from a week off because of appendicitis, something that you went through, and you know how painful that is.
Yeah.
And, looking back at my bike racing history and talking with some of the athletes I've worked with, I kind of felt that either Carlos Sainz was going to be completely off his game or hyper-focused.
Right.
And it turned out to be the latter. He was hyper-focused, and, man, he was on fire. I mean, he didn't get pole. He was just outside of pole by less than a tenth of a second, I believe.
Right.
That's how close it was for pole position. And then he got a great start in the race, starting P2 behind Max Verstappen, who had the pole, but was on him. Max Verstappen has had a history of getting out of DRS range, drag reduction system, within the first 5 corners of the track on lap number 1. And Carlos Sainz did not let that happen.
No.
And so I really feel, even though Max Verstappen had an issue with the right, I believe it was the right rear brake, Carlos Sainz was right there, and I felt he was really going to challenge for the lead regardless of Max's issues.
Yeah.
Or I should say the Red Bull issues.
Yeah, and just going down the list, what's interesting is the order was really pretty shaken up. I mean, we had Ferrari 1-2 at the top, and then you had McLaren 3-4, and then you had Sergio Perez down in 5th, and
Fifth.
Yeah,
Fifth place for what is the all-conquering car.
yeah. And what's interesting is a couple things of note is the Aston Martins were decent. They don't seem to have the pace that they had last year, do they? And then also,
No,
well, go on. Yeah, let's talk about Aston
no,
Martin
no.
for
Go
a second.
ahead, Charlie.
And I was gonna say, yeah,
Yeah, no.
Aston Martin just didn't. They just don't seem to have. They weren't bad in qualifying, but they just don't seem to have the race pace, do they?
No, they're definitely at this time not pushing at the front of the pack like they showed us at the beginning of last year. They're definitely at the leading edge of the mid pack, and their points definitely suggest that. Uh, I felt it was unfortunate that Fernando Alonso got a 20-second penalty for what was considered brake checking George Russell in the Mercedes on the waning laps of the race.
Right.
Um, Eddie Jordan, former team owner, actually kind of criticized the penalty a bit and basically said, sure, maybe he did brake check him, but it's up to the driver behind. I'm getting Papa Frank voice here. It's up to the driver behind, in this case George Russell, to avoid what the car in front of him is doing.
Yeah.
So that 20-second penalty, albeit not catastrophic for the team because it just pushed Lance Stroll forward 2 positions or 1 position, and Fernando Alonso, I think, ended up 8th place instead of 6th place. They still scored decent points, but an unfortunate situation for, in my opinion, as far as penalties being thrown out there, and to the pace of the Aston Martin. Yeah, they definitely need to pick it up, and maybe they can show some of that in Japan coming up this weekend.
Yeah, and before we get off of Australia, we definitely have to bring up the fact that the Mercedes cars, really weren't particularly fast in qualifying or the race. And I mean, they were the all-conquering Formula One team for about 8 years, from 2014 to 2022. And I mean, they just, I don't know what's happening there. Maybe it's all the turmoil because their star driver Lewis Hamilton's leaving at the end of the year. But man, I don't know. What do you think on Mercedes?
Yeah, they were definitely, even though they had a double DNF, that their pace did not represent the pace that Toto Wolff would normally demand. And there seems to be a little bit of controversy about Toto Wolff being at the helm of Mercedes and his continued leadership at that team. And maybe that's feeding into a bit of what's going on within that team. The other factor is, I mean, we did just talk about Aston Martin, but they're doing a good job of pilfering a lot of technical people from other teams, including Mercedes.
Right.
So maybe the team is just not as tightly knit as it needs to be.
Yep.
Maybe they're not wholly thrilled with George Russell being their number one driver, even though they're committed to that concept.
Yep.
And like you mentioned, Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari, that's a big change. There's a lot of change happening at Mercedes right now.
Yeah, and as you mentioned a few minutes ago, the Japanese Grand Prix is coming up this weekend, being April 5th. And it's interesting that the Japanese race had always been the second to last, or last in some cases, or third to last race of the year. And they moved it to spring this time.
Yeah, it's interesting that they did that. I don't know the whole story behind that, but I think one of the factors definitely could be the weather factor. We spoke about this briefly before we came on air, and I really feel strongly and agree with you that, being in the springtime, there's so much less likely to get that adverse weather to roll in. And in Japan, particularly at the Suzuka track, weather rolls in very, very quickly and can just as quickly go away.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's kind of like Spa in Belgium. You're up in the Ardennes forest, and it's the first big mountainous landmass from the ocean. And so, it just has a tendency to rain a lot there. And you're right. It's exactly the same at the Suzuka circuit. But should be a fun race. Are you expecting Red Bull to be back on pace?
I expect them to be better than they were in Australia, but I think, again, there's a couple factors that are weighing on me to take this as being another opportunity for Ferrari. The track, albeit different, has a lot of similar characteristics to the Australian Grand Prix circuit, does Suzuka. And I honestly also feel Mercedes should be better because of some of the way the turns are laid out, that they should actually show some better pace. So we might see some interesting moves from Mercedes as well. McLaren's just kind of been hovering there, picking up the scraps, doing incredibly well. But I really feel like this race is another race for Ferrari to take another victory.
Oh, I like that. You know what? I'm with you on that. And one thing we didn't mention, we're running out of time here, but real quick, is there is some chaos inside the all-conquering Red Bull team. For those of you who don't know, Christian Horner was accused of acting inappropriately towards a female employee. And as far as Red Bull's concerned, they're like, "Oh, everything's great. It's all resolved. We're good." But it's creating chaos with Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen's dad, who has an issue with Christian Horner, and there's a lot of turmoil within that organization.
Yeah, take a line out of the Wizard of Oz. They're really trying to keep all of their issues behind the green curtain,
right?
But a lot of that is spilling out underneath the curtain, and we're starting to see some of the chinks in the armor.
Yep.
And it seems to have had an effect on their race car in Australia, not their racecraft. I mean, Max Verstappen is an incredible driver. He's going to be fast no matter what he gets into. But you were definitely seeing chinks in that armor right now. And again, perfect opportunity for Ferrari to pounce on that.
Yep. And that is the Japanese Grand Prix coming up this weekend on ESPN if you're inside the States. Chris, that is going to wrap it up for us today.
Well, who's your pick, Charlie?
My pick. I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. What about you?
Okay, you know what? I'm glad you're picking Leclerc because I'm going with Carlos Sainz. I have a feeling Charles Leclerc is going to drive like a man possessed and really go for it because I feel he's been outdriven by Carlos Sainz.
Agreed.
So I'm fearful that he might do a Leclerc spin. But Sainz has just shown dedication, focus. He's a driver without a contract for next year, and he's going to land. He wants to land someplace and land someplace good, and he wants to showcase that he's the better driver of the two on that Ferrari team.
Oh yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about next week. So thanks for joining us here on the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio. We will see you next week.